Hi, I'm Chris Mason, a senior workflow engineer at Syncronology, and the purpose of this video is to give you a brief introduction to Singlepoint and, more importantly, ProjectPoint. Okay, so the first screen a user is presented with is the login screen. I'm going to log in as Chris, and once we're logged in we can see what modules we have permission to use. And actually Chris's default module is set to ProjectPoint, so we go straight to ProjectPoint in this case. But Chris also has access to things like the issue manager system and the CRM system, and Absolute Reporting, which is a module for developing and running reports. Chris is also an administrator, so he can see the administration tab, and this is exactly where we can add new users to the system and specify users' permissions. You can see in this system we have 3 users, and against a user we know things like what department they're a part of, which company, and we can also set the company's hierarchy as well. So we can know who a user's manager is, for example, or the manager's manager. This is useful for applying specific business rules or for escalating tasks, etc. We, like I say, we have departments and companies in here, and you may want to add additional companies and departments to the system if you wanted suppliers, for example, to access the system, or if you wanted all of your customers in the system to access the system, or just as a reference. Okay, so let's take a look at ProjectPoint. Now, ProjectPoint's been developed in the maintenance type module, and the way that this is designed is down the left hand side you have your entities. So these are your data entities, and in the case of ProjectPoint we have projects in the system, and a project is obviously made up of lots of tasks, and the first entity that's selected when a user opens ProjectPoint is the tasks and actions entity, and the idea is that the user is presented with any tasks that they're actually responsible for, and in this case Chris is responsible for 1 task at the moment, and this would be in order of when the task is due. So the task that's due the soonest is at the top, and this would be like the work list for that user, if you like. So as you can see on the left hand side here we have a number of options. These are what we call views. So this first view is the default view, and if we jump to, for example, my open tasks and actions view, all of these views have been designed, and what I mean by that is we can decide which columns are shown in this view, and we can also specify the data source filter. So in this case we're filtering down all of the tasks and actions that are in the system to only show the open tasks and actions for Chris, the logged in user. So I'm logged in as Chris, so my open tasks and actions just returns this 1 task. If we jump to all tasks and actions, you can see actually within the system there's lots of tasks and actions at the moment, and they're all related to different projects that are in the system. So we have views, we have the data source filter that returns specific rows of data, and we can design what this view looks like, and we also have what we call runtime filters at the top here, and for each view these can actually be different. And the idea behind this is that the user can actually filter this data down dynamically. So for example, you might want to see all of the tasks and actions for a particular department. So let's choose technical, and if we apply that filter here you can see that data is filtered down. So we have that's the tasks and actions entity, and we mentioned that this task, for example, comes from the phase demo project. So let's just jump across to the projects entity, and it's the same principle here. So we have a few views. We have the open projects, we have closed projects, which doesn't return any data, and we have template projects, and we have one template project in the system at the moment. So if we go back to the open projects view, you can see at the moment we have 3 projects in the system which are currently open, and very quickly you can see the status of these projects because we have this status indicator here. So we have 2 reds and we have a grey symbol here. And the reason that these the status of these projects are red is because at least one of the tasks within it has gone overdue. So you can see actually the end date of this project is 10th of August, but we're getting the status bubbled up. The worst case is being bubbled up to the very top. So this is quite powerful. You can come into the project entity and you can very quickly see if there's any issues within your project. Okay, so if we add a new project to the system, you can see that we have 3 options here. So we can add an ad hoc project to the system, and what this means is we can actually design the project structure in Singlepoint, and we can set the tasks, start and end dates, for example, and we can just run that project as an ad hoc project. The second option, which is the most powerful option, is the Microsoft Project option. And what this allows you to do is import a Microsoft Project file, and in Singlepoint it builds the structure of that project, and it hooks up all of the tasks based on predecessors, successors. We bring in things like the start date and the end date of those tasks. So in this case, we're using all of the features of Microsoft Project. The advanced planning you can do in there. You might be doing resource planning. You might be putting your non-working days, etc. in there. So you're using Microsoft Project as your planning tool, and then you're importing into ProjectPoint, and ProjectPoint really becomes your task engine. So this is where you can see visibility of all of your live projects, as we've seen. And this is where you would assign responsible users to those tasks, and get visibility of all of your projects. So this is the type of project that we want to create. So we can give this our title. So let's call this New Product 2014, and this is where we need to browse to a Microsoft Project file. So I've actually got an example Microsoft Project here, and if we open this up in Microsoft Project, as I said, this would be where you create all of your tasks. You may be hooking up your successor tasks here. You might be doing some advanced rules in here, etc. So once you're happy that your project has been planned correctly and you have everything in here, you would then suck this into Singlepoint, and if we navigate to that file, we can see that happen. Okay, so we go into phase projects. This is my project file here, and this will import this project into ProjectPoint. And as I said, what it's doing is adding those tasks to Singlepoint, hooking up the predecessors, successors, and setting the start and end dates of those tasks. So if we look in ProjectPoint now, we should see that we have this New Product 2014, and you can see that it was created by Chris. And if we open that project, we're presented with the information about this project. So the first tab we see is the Details tab, and again we can see who created it, and when it was created, the start and the end date. So this information was pulled through from the Microsoft Project file, and we have the complete duration, and we actually have the option in here to change the title. We could set another project manager if we like, so we can see the other users in the system, and we can give maybe some description. So it's worth mentioning at this point that the project point you see here is the base system. The idea is that we mold this and we add additional fields, etc., to the customer's requirement. So for Teleflex, you may want to have additional fields added here. You may have different business rules that get applied in the system, and the idea is that this is just a base system that we do that to. Okay, so we have the details tab, and as we move across here, we can do things like define the team. So let's add, for example, Richard to the team, and you can see here Richard is added to the grid. And if we move along, we've got tasks. So these are all of the tasks that were in the Microsoft project file. This is a flat view of all of those tasks. And the next tab along is the task tree. So in here we can see more of the structure of those tasks. So this is the same structure as we've seen in the Microsoft project file. And you can see actually that the status of these projects isn't looking good, and the reason for that is that they're all overdue, or something inside of this is overdue. So that in this example we have this milestones task, and actually its subtasks here, we can see that one of those tasks has gone overdue, and that's why milestones has turned red, because the worst case bubbles up to the top. So we have grey, which means that this task is in the future. So if we look at this one, for example, it's due to start on the 6th of October. So that's in the future. If a task was not overdue but should have been started, it would change to yellow. So you can see here we have a yellow one, and this the start date of this is the 1st of September and the end date is the 30th of December. So we're between these two dates. It's not overdue, but we haven't progressed this task. Someone hasn't marked this task as being started, so it's this yellow color. But actually we have two other tasks within this phase gate that are overdue, and that's why this one is red, because the worst case is bubbled up. If these weren't overdue, we would see yellow here. The idea is that we can very quickly see, by looking at this top level view of the project, which tasks have an issue. So you can dive very quickly into this. So you may have noticed that as we select nodes in the tree, the information on the right hand side changes to reflect the node that we have selected. So for example, if we open up this PP build and click on purchase components, this information changes to show the purchase component details. We have the information here, such as the complete duration, start date, end date again, any subtask. In this case it doesn't have any. We can see any task that it's related to. So we can see that its successor task is this assemble task, which is actually, you can see in the tree here. And we also have this concept of actions. So what we can do here is add as many actions as we like and set responsible users for those actions. And the idea is that this main task, purchase components, actually requires a number of actions to complete it, and there may be a number of people involved. So although we may have someone responsible for the completion of purchase components, that responsible user or the project manager can actually add additional actions that make up the completion of that task. So let's actually open this task information. So if I click on edit here in the grid, this opens that task, so I can supply additional information about that task. There may be a description that we want to supply here. As you can see, that we have the start and the end date, which are grayed out because these are set by the Microsoft project file, we can set a responsible user. So let's set this to Richard. We could actually upload some supporting documents if we wanted. So we can upload supporting documents. This kicks off a workflow for doing that. We can see again the related tasks, and from here again we can add those actions if required. So we'll set Richard as the responsible user, and the idea is that you would work your way through the project, assign your responsible users. They would get notified. So in this case, Richard will receive an email to say that he's responsible for the task purchase components for this project, and within that email Richard would have a link which would take him directly to ProjectPoint and the purchase components task, and that would open. So let's actually log off as Chris, and we would log in the system as Richard. And as you can see, Richard only has access to the ProjectPoint module, and we can see that task here, purchase components here in the tasks view. And from here, Richard can actually open this task up and mark this as started and set a completion percentage. So let's mark this as started, and maybe Richard has completed 10% of this task. And you will see now that we actually have another status symbol, which is this blue color, and this means that this task has been started, it's not overdue, and it's progressing. And we can see here that the completion of this task, as Richard set, is 10%. And if we actually looked at the project now, we would see that that project would, inside of this project, we would see that completion in here as well. So you can see actually it's calculated that 10% completion of that purchase components, because its duration is 80 days, actually works out at 9% of this PP build task, and 2% of the product in process validation task, and 1% of this phase gate. So we actually apply the same calculation as Microsoft Project does. So when we export this back to Microsoft Project and look at the percentage, we will see it's the same calculation. And actually, if we go back to tasks and actions, we can also complete this task. So let's mark this as completed. This sets the task completion now to 100%, and it's dropped off the tasks and actions view because it's actually been completed. So if we looked in the My Completed Tasks and Actions, we would see that this task, which was assigned to Richard, has now been completed. So let's log back in as the project manager, which was Chris, and jump back to that project, and we have obviously some progress on this project which we saw in the tree. So now it's 6% completed because we've made some 85% of this PP build task is completed, and we have the purchase components task which is fully completed. You can see that from a project manager point of view, when they look in the system, they're always seeing the live view of how this project is progressing, and we're getting the completion percentages calculated all the way up the tree, as you do in Microsoft Project. So, this project's running, people are accessing the system, they're completing their tasks, they're progressing their tasks, putting the completion percentages in, and this project is always showing you the real live view of how it's progressing. And the idea is that the project manager can actually come along and export a new Microsoft Project file which shows the updated completion of those tasks. So I've just done an export, and it's created this new project file, and we always see the history of those projects. So you can see that initial one that I imported, and we've now just done an export. And the idea is that you save this project file away, and you can open this new file up in Microsoft Project. And if we look at the information that's supplied, you can see that we can see the unique ID that Singlepoint's given those tasks. We can also see the responsible users that were applied. So in this case, Richard was set as the responsible user for this purchase components. We can see that this purchase components task has actually been completed. And if we also bring in the percentage of completion, you can see that we have the same calculation for task completion in Microsoft Project as we did in Singlepoint. And the idea is that the project manager would make any updates or changes to the Microsoft Project file, for example, add additional tasks, change dates, etc. And when we re-import this back into ProjectPoint, it would update the project to reflect those changes. So if, for example, we find that task that we completed, we may want to add an additional task in here. Let's call this check components. We'll give it a duration of a few days. And you can see this task is now added to the project file. Let's save that. And if we jump back to the ProjectPoint, we can import that new saved version of the Microsoft Project file. So if we navigate to that file, this is the updated version of that project. And again, in the background, this is checking the tasks we have in ProjectPoint with the tasks in Microsoft Project, and applying those changes. And when this is finished, if we jump back to the task tree, we will see that that new task has been added to the tree. And we can see that if we open up this phase-gate 5, and you can see here this purchase components was the completed task, and then we added this check components task underneath. And at this point, you could obviously assign a responsible user to that new task, and again they would receive a notification to say that they're made responsible for it. So you can see how we can we do all the planning in Microsoft Project. We bring the project file in, it builds the task tree, we assign responsible users, they come in and out of the system and update the task completion, and it's progressing this project, and we bubble up the status of those tasks to the top, and we also do the calculation of the completion. And from a very top level view, the project manager can see how those projects are progressing and if there's any issues. And that's how ProjectPoint works.